Hi, I'm Daniel Fisher here at Sweetwater Sound, and today we are talking about arpeggios. Okay, so today we're going to talk about arpeggiation. And I know most of you have already used arpeggiators. Those who haven't, welcome to Synthesis. But there are things about arpeggiations that you might not know, and I'm just going to show you some overviews and some ideas that I've discovered while playing with arpeggiators. If you've seen any of my videos, you know I use them a lot because it's just great for demonstrating. And it's a great thing if you have only a synth and you want to amuse yourself. An arpeggiator is just a great way to sit down and have something that sounds like music, especially if you don't have the chops to play consistently and play the same notes over and over. Arpeggiators are a dream for that. So I brought three different things here. I brought the ASM Hydrasynth as an example of a digital synth. I brought the Moog Matriarch as an example of an analog synth. And I have the Roland TR8, which is basically a digital version of their analog drum machine. So I got all the bases covered. And I have MIDI going in various different ways that I'll shift throughout this lesson. But right now, I just want to talk about the Ashen Sound Machines and its arpeggiators and arpeggiators in general. So an arpeggiation is when you hold some keys down and your synthesizer then plays each of those notes in a row, typically at the same unit of the beat. So if you have it set to quarter notes, it's going to go through each of those notes in quarter notes or eighth notes or sixteenths or dotteds or whatever. And you have different patterns. So right now I have a very plain sound on purpose. Has a little boost at the beginning, just a little bit of a filter sweep, and then I'll change that over time to show you some ideas you can do with that. But if I just turn the arpeggiator on and I have the arpeggiator set to up and I'm only doing one octave, and then I hold a single note, you're going to hear a single note repeated at the tempo of this. And I always have the ability to go in and change the tempo. And if I hit more than one note, it's going to arpeggiate upwards because I'm on up. So you hit the low note, then the high note. To us, it sounds like back and forth, but if I do three notes, all of a sudden it's obvious it's only up. And you can go up, you can go down, you can go up and down. And here's one interesting thing. Different brands do up and down different ways, and then other ones give you options of both ways. And that is, if you're going up and then coming down, do you repeat the top note? So do you go ba 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 ba, or you do ba 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 ba? And not only does that have a different feel sound-wise, it's very important timing-wise, because your arpeggiation, the number of notes you use in your arpeggiation, is kind of dictating what kind of measure you're using, what kind of time divisions. So if I do an up-down in one way, like I'll do a 1-5 and a flat 7, you hear a real 3, right? But if I do it the other way, now we're more in 4, okay? And so it really matters whether the top and the bottom is repeated or not. And more synths are giving you that option, but if you don't have that option, it definitely is going to affect how many notes you choose. I'll go back down to just an up, and I'll show you that if you're just creating an ambient sort of thing by yourself, it sort of doesn't matter what time you're in. You can just move notes around as you want and have as many notes on and off. But if you go to a drum beat, okay, you have to have the right number of notes that fits within a measure. So obviously 2 is going to work. But now 3 has a very 3 feel, right? And 4 will go back to a 4-4 feel. And then obviously other numbers are going to make odd things like 5. And if you're just playing by yourself, most people don't even notice that you're changing time signatures, and it just doesn't matter. But like I said, if you're locking with something else, all of a sudden that's very important. So it's just something to be aware of. So again, here's up, here's down, here's up and down, and here the ends are repeating. Here the ends are not repeating. And the next one's order, and this one's really useful because it arpeggiates the notes in the order that you play the notes. And what that kind of gives you is kind of some of the elements of a sequencer and some of the elements of an arpeggiator. It's part sequencer because you get to choose the order of the notes. Instead of always going from low to high or high to low or up and back, I'm going to do one now where I'm picking notes kind of in different places of the keyboard here. And I'll latch that. And latching means that you can just let go of the keyboard. And so there's a very specific pattern that we're hearing here. And so, of course, if you do that, now it's up to you to always remember to play it in the pattern that you want. And so it's one more thing to worry about while you're composing in real time, but it is a really powerful thing to have. The next one's random, and I really like random, especially if I'm doing something atmospheric with delays. And we should bring up some delays now, so I'm going to just go here and turn up my wet dry on my delay. And as always, I have this set to a ping pong because I just love ping pong delays in my arpeggiations, which means you get the original signal, then an echo, then an echo. So here's what that sounds like up. And I can turn my BPM sync on, and if I play my arpeggiation, you'll hear that the echo is going in perfect time with the arpeggiation. Now, I think that's a great way to learn how to set your delay time, but when you're really ready to record, I think it's far better to have your delays not synced and simply have them close. Having a delay almost but not perfect creates these flams and this motion and 3D-ness that I think is far superior and far more interesting than the echoes coming exactly on the same time as the notes. So first I'll turn the delay up a little bit here, and I'm going to just switch through some different units of the beat against that delay. And so what it's doing when it's perfectly in time is you're almost making chords because you know that each of those notes are lining up over each other. And so now it's kind of up to you to listen for a way to have the right number of notes and the right unit of the beat that makes the kind of chord you want. So I'm going to change some more. But now, having said that, I'm now going to take the BPM sync off and do the same thing, except now I'm going to manually change the time. And notice where when I find one that I like, I'm going to just slowly dial in and around that, and I create all these additional effects. And that subtlety cannot be had if you're locked to clock, because the clock's going to just try and put those always perfectly in time. So big fan of not using the BPM sync except when you're learning to hear which kind you like, but then get it there, take the BPM sync off and start turning that. So now I have that in random and I have my delays going. And now this is probably a good time to talk about octaves. So when the octave is set to 1, what the arpeggiation is doing is literally playing only the notes you're holding. When I go to 2 octaves, it's simply going to jump, it's going to do all those and then do the second octave. And that's a great way to cover more space. So if you want high frequency things going on and low frequency things going on, just add more octaves. So here's 2. Here's 3. before. Another thing is chord, and so what it basically is doing is playing the chord that you hold in the unit of the beat. And then this one has phrase. And different companies have different ways of doing it. But basically, they just have some pre-recorded phrases. So when you hold a chord, it'll do something like this. And there's lots of different patterns. Just go through them all slowly and try them out, see which one you like. Now I'm going to go back to order. And now I'm going to show you. I've shown you what happens when you change units of the beats on delay or just manually change the delay time. Now I'm going to leave the delay time alone and start changing the division of time on the arpeggiator. And when you only have one device, changing units of the beat doesn't seem like it matters as much. You could change the length of time to half, but then slow down the arpeggiation rate to half or double the time, and you can make it be exactly the same. It's when it's against something else that all of a sudden it matters which units of the beats you're using. But in this case, because I have a delay I'm going to leave solid, I could show it to you just on this, that if I hold something and change units of the beat, it not only changes the tempo, but it has a different impact against the delay time. So first I'm going to go to quarter. Eighth, and 16th, and 32nd. And obviously you can hear that working against the delay. If you have a delay you like, typically, if you're just changing eighths, quarters, 32nds, and 16ths, it's typically going to still do something exactly the way you like it because it's just a subdivision. But now we can also do triplets. So here's the same thing. Here's eighth note, and now eighth note triplet. Back to triplet, and now change some divisions. Turn the triplet off. So all of those things, whether you have dotteds or triplets, or eighths or 16ths, 32nds, all of that really matters when it's, well, what are you doing that against? Because, like I said, you can compensate with the tempo and change all that. Another thing we need to talk about is swing. And basically, in jazz, if you have a pair of eighth notes, instead of da-da-da-da, it's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And this one gives you fixed steps of swing. Other ones give you completely adjustable, and you can either swing positively or negatively. So instead of da 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 da, it could be da 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 da. All of those, you could talk about them all day, but just adjusting them while you're listening is really the only way to do that sort of thing. So here we go. Now I'm going to turn the delay off to make it a little more clear. Okay, it's more of a galloping feel, and the more you swing, the longer the long note gets and the shorter the short note gets. Both of the notes occur in the same amount of time, it's just that one's stealing its time from the other one. All the way off. A little bit. Almost don't even notice it. Now you're starting to notice it. Again, just try it. Try all of these things and have patience especially when you're messing with delays, to try things for a nice long time. Like try something, let it settle, especially with delays go with lots of feedback. Take your time and listen to it, and always just make micro adjustments and then wait, because it takes a little while to settle out and listen to what you got there. And if you want, save all of those iterations to a different patch location, and then you can quickly switch back and forth to those different times without even adjusting. So that's a very cool trick. All right, so now I'm going to talk just a little bit about envelopes. And when you're sequencing or arpeggiating, it really matters what your decay time is, what your release time is, what your attack time is. If you have a patch that has a very slow attack and you have an arpeggiation and you speed it up, it's going to seem like the patch is getting quieter. Why? Because it never gets to its full attack and it's already starting the next note, which is starting the envelope over again. So when you're playing with an arpeggiation, always sit down with the envelope parameters for both the amp and the filter ready to go. So here I'll latch that. And now watch what happens if I go in, for example, and start messing with the filter a little bit. And now put that into some delay again. And now listen as I start messing with the filter envelope. And now I'm going to increase the release time. And now I'm doing the same thing to the volume envelope, a different feel. In a polyphonic synthesizer, you need to be thinking of your release time of your amplifier as tails. So do you hear this chord I'm building up? That's from all the previous notes still ringing, but the filter's closed off. So now I go back to the filter envelope, and if I increase that release time, it's one of my favorite things to do with a polyphonic synthesizer versus a mono. Yeah, you can get a polyphonic synth to sound mono, but you can't get a mono synth to have all those extra notes ringing in an arpeggiation. In fact, some people, when they hear an arpeggiation with lots of amplitude release time, they'll make comments like, oh, there's always reverb on these patches. And it's not reverb, it's the other notes still ringing out. So especially in a polyphonic patch, pay careful attention to your decay times, your release time, your sustain level of both your filter envelope and your amp envelope. Okay, so now I'm moving to the Moog Matriarch. And what I'm doing with MIDI is I'm sending the out from the Hydrasynth to the in of the Matriarch. I've made sure that the MIDI channel of this synth is different than the MIDI channel of that synth. One thing to always understand is that the clock has nothing to do with MIDI channels. So if you simply want to keep this thing from talking to this thing, set them on two different MIDI channels. So this is on MIDI channel 1, this is now on MIDI channel 2, which means that my pads are not playing this, but the clock and the start-stop information is coming from this to over here. So one of the first things you got to learn when you connect all this, and I understand it can be a very hair-pulling thing. I went through it a little bit right before I set all this up. But learn how to turn on and off whether notes are transmitted, whether program changes are transmitted, whether clock is transmitted, whether something only listens to the internal clock or the USB clock or the MIDI clock, or if it automatically jumps to whatever clock happens to be going at any given time. Knowing that for every piece of your equipment that you're going to do this to will save you a tremendous amount of time. And if you're not using some sort of MIDI splitter box, you need to understand how in, outs, and through of MIDI work. So a quick thing on that, the through jack of MIDI is an exact copy of whatever's coming into it. It has nothing to do with what you're playing on that synth. It's just a pass-through. So in this case, this is my master clock, so I'm coming out of that into this, then the through of that into this. All of them are on different MIDI channels, so these notes won't play those drums. These notes won't play these keys, but this is sending the MIDI clock to all of them. And after that, you just have to try it. And there's lots of learning, and there's lots more variations of how it deals with the clock and how all the subdivisions work and whether it sends start and stop messages. But all that's for you to learn for your own particular equipment. So right now, again, I'm back to just the Matriarch. I just have it set to a nice fat 4 oscillator sawtooth sound because I can. And I have an arpeggiation going. I don't have the hold button on, so I have to keep holding the keys. And because I'm getting MIDI clock from somewhere else, normally this knob that would be doing the tempo of the arpeggiation is now doing divisions or units of the beats of this clock, right? So if I tap, 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 and now I have a one-to-one relationship with my tap tempo. So if I go tap, 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 it should go ba, 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 ba. If I go slow, tap, 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 ba, 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 ba. Okay, so everything's working as it should. And now, since we know that this blinking tempo here is this blinking tempo here, but now as I turn this division knob, I'm going to do different units of the beat against that clock. And the one thing you should notice is that I'm not slowly increasing the tempo, I'm rapidly jumping from a different division of time over that time. And it can be very slow, it can be very fast. And we'll set up a little filter here. And like this synth, it also has the ability to do forward and backward. And it does the order. And it'll do random. And I have a choice between 1, 2, and 3 octaves. Or here's 1 octave, 2 octaves, and 3 octaves. And I have a nice analog ping pong delay over here. And again, I'm not going to synchronize it. I could, I'll show you that real quick with synchronized. But I personally really like it better by doing it by hand. So remember to take your time to find the magic spot. Turn the mix up a little higher than usual. Now when I turn the mix off, I'm going from that. It's very pretty. And now I have a delay time that I like. Now listen what happens as I change the division of the arpeggiation into that delay. beautiful thing to play with. So now we're going to try and get complicated. We're going to try and have the TR-8 doing some drums. It will be following the clock of the Hydrasynth, and the arpeggiation of the Matriarch will also be following the clock of the Hydrasynth. I'm going to start the drum machine on a basic pattern. I'm using the pads to set some arpeggiation notes here. As always, I have unit of the beat here. I have complete control over tempo. And I can bring up some arpeggiations here. And I can play this one, and this one's set to a different unit of the beat as that. The idea being, if I change tempo, this should all change with it. So I hope that taught you a little bit more about arpeggios. If you have any further questions about the gear I used today, please contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. My name is Daniel Fisher. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for watching. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. For more videos like these, click here or visit Sweetwater for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.